Every so often, you encounter an idea that sounds almost too simple maybe, yet it claims to hold the key to some really profound shifts in our lives. Today, we're taking a deep dive into exactly that kind of concept. It's something its proponents call a one simple change, and it promises, well, nothing less than a path to joy, meaningful connections, and even, the capacity to truly benefit the world. Our source material for this deep dive comes from Candice Denver. She's the founder of the Great Freedom Movement. We're specifically drawing from her book, One Simple Change Makes Life Easy, which is itself based on her public talks from 2007 across India, the U.S., and Sweden.
Yeah, and our mission today is really to unpack this concept, this one simple change. At its heart, it's about relaxing the mind, specifically from focusing on fixed points of view. We want to understand how it claims to be a shortcut to well being, how it might transform everything from, say, our personal relationships right up to maybe even our approach to global challenges. What's really interesting here, I think, is how universal and, well, just how accessible this wisdom is presented as being.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning of this teaching. Where does it come from? Candace shares this foundational insight she had as a child. She said everything felt profoundly connected, um, indivisible. That's the word she uses. And when she was aware of this, she describes feeling completely carefree, joyful. She apparently even looked up the dictionary definition. Indivisible, incapable of undergoing division. Now, for us, living in a world that often feels so fractured and separate, what does this concept of indivisibility really imply?
Well, it's a really crucial starting point, isn't it? This idea suggests that fundamentally nothing can be truly separated from the whole. Everything is interconnected. And our source material highlights that Candace, like a lot of us, she tried the conventional paths to happiness. Yeah, education, religion, work, relationships, even different psychological or spiritual methods. Yet she consistently found these were, in her words, always just out of reach. The real, she calls it the soothing energy of deep understanding that came not from getting something new, but from the simple, deep knowing that everything is inseparable. It's like recognizing this underlying unity that's already there.
Okay, so if that's the foundation, that indivisibility, how
Yeah.
does she bridge that to the actual one simple change she discovered? What is the practice itself?
Right. She describes it as resting for short moments, repeated many times until it became automatic. Just that. This simple practice, she actually posits, is the basis for solving all problems. It sounds so simple, but it's about a shift in attention. Yeah. A kind of mental relaxation that allows something else to emerge.
Resting. Yeah. But resting is what exactly? What are we resting at?
Ah, good question. The teaching defines it as awareness. It's described as being like the clear sky.
Yeah.
You're still alert, you're cognizant, even when there's no specific thinking going on. It's called the innate wisdom quality of the mind, something that doesn't need cultivation. It's even referred to as the flawless knower that underlies everything.
A flawless knower. But what does that actually feel like in daily life? I mean, how does this flawless knower interact with our busy, often pretty flawed thinking minds?
Well, it's maybe less about an interaction and more about a discovery, you see.
Hmm.
The insight is that this awareness isn't a state you have to achieve. It's presented as what you already are. It's described as ever present. This flawless knower doesn't need to do anything. It's simply the background, the context, right,
Hmm.
in which all experience arises. So the feeling in daily life, then, it's more like a subtle shift. You go from being completely caught up in the content of your thoughts to resting as the space in which those thoughts appear.
Okay, so if our true nature is this clear awareness, this space, it does raise the question, what about all the stuff that fills that space? The endless stream of thoughts, emotions, personal beliefs we all have churning around. What does Candace call those, and how do they fit in?
Right, those are what she calls points of view, and
Yeah.
they're described as appearances of awareness, which means they arise within awareness, but they are not awareness itself. They're distinct. They are ephemeral, like the flight path of a bird in the sky
Right.
or a line drawn in water. They just vanish, no trace. And the profound part here is if they are that fleeting, why do we get so attached? Why do we hold on to them so tightly, thinking they define us? The one simple change involves basically relaxing the mind for a brief moment from that instinct to follow or block these viewpoints. It's about letting them be without giving them all that weight.
That makes sense because, I mean, many of us spend a huge amount of energy trying to manage our thoughts and feelings, right?
Right.
We categorize them.
Mm.
Positive, negative. We strive to be good. But Candace suggests this is like trying to put together a 1 trillion piece jigsaw puzzle of the cloudless sky, just exhausting and ultimately futile.
Precisely. Yeah, that's a great analogy. The source material points out that our usual attempts analyzing, rejecting, trying to fix thoughts and emotions, they only strengthen their apparent reality.
Hmm.
They make them seem more solid, more personal than they actually are. The true solution, it says here, is to rest as awareness when those afflictive states arise. The challenging emotions, anger, anxiety, sadness, frustration, all that stuff. By seeing them as nothing but ephemeral appearances within awareness, things that have no inherent power of their own, the teaching claims they actually transform. They become wisdom and compassion. So the shift is from wrestling with them to simply observing them as passing weather in the sky of awareness.
Wow. Okay, that sounds like it could really change how we handle challenges, both internally and externally. So what about relationships? Because they can be such a minefield, such a complex interplay of these points of view.
Well, according to the teaching, our conventional relationships often depend on matching points of view. Doesn't that ring true? We expect our partners to agree with us, even to, as she says, love our points of view. Which is kind of funny when you think about it. The source highlights that this initial infatuation based on agreement, it usually only lasts a short while. Then comes the blame, the disappointment when love seems to just disappear. But resting as awareness, the teaching suggests, reveals that love is already within us. In fact, it is the fundamental condition of what we are. So when we live from that pure awareness, we're apparently able to love unconditionally, regardless of how others behave, because the love is sourced from within, not from external validation or agreement.
So, okay, let's take an example. If I'm having that really strong screw you thought towards, say, an unreliable partner, is that also just an ephemeral point of view? And I mean, how can we genuinely approach it that way in the heat of the moment? It feels so real.
Yes, that's exactly the point being made. The teaching posits it's just an ephemeral point of view that's equal to every other point of view.
Yeah.
As intense as it feels, its nature is the same as a fleeting, pleasant thought. And the practice encourages us not to judge ourselves for having such thoughts. Because, as the source states, all words are completely equal in their essential nature as appearances in awareness. This understanding over time is said to lead to the birth of compassion, moving beyond what's called petty emotional reactivity. It's about recognizing that our true being, that awareness is changeless, timeless, and forever free. It's unaffected by any appearance, no matter how intense. And from that perspective, you start to realize everyone is kind of in the same boat, right? Experiencing these fleeting points of view.
Okay. The teaching claims this concept of awareness unleashes some incredible potential. Beyond just personal well-being, where else does this potential show up most noticeably? Like, what does it suggest about our inherent capacities, what we might traditionally call giftedness, for instance?
Yeah, this is where Candice O'Denver makes a pretty bold claim. She says, giftedness is something that is inherent in every mind. She suggests that what we perceive as, say, a high IQ is simply the ability to access the unused capacity of the mind. And by resting as awareness, people are reported to experience things like increased precision in their thinking, enhanced abstract thought, greater emotional sensitivity, even tremendous energy. So it's not about acquiring new knowledge necessarily, but rather, as she puts it, tapping into an extraordinarily beneficial nature that exists inherently within every human being. It's like uncovering potential that's already there, just obscured.
Taking that inherent capacity idea even further, what does the teaching suggest about something as fundamental as our identity, our sense of self, and even, well, our experience of death?
Yeah, it goes quite deep here for sure. The source frames the personal identity, our sense of being a separate individual defined by our thoughts, history, experiences. It frames that as a complete fiction. It even notes that infants don't really have a solid sense of I. It develops later through repeated social conditioning. The relief, according to the teaching, comes from realizing there's nothing here but awareness and death itself. It's described as just another point of view. Candace shares a really powerful example about her younger sister's death. Apparently, through this practice of resting, her sister faced her end with utter lucidity and peace. And this transformed the family's whole experience of grief, even dissolving old judgments. The insight seems to be that if identity as we know it is fluid, a construct, then death isn't the cessation of who you fundamentally are, which is awareness.
Wow, that really connects the personal to the universal, doesn't it? So, if this one simple change helps us find peace within, how does the teaching propose it addresses the massive problems we face as a species? Things like poverty, pollution, war. It feels like a big leap from individual peace to solving global issues.
It is a big leap, and this is where the material becomes quite, well, revolutionary in its scope. It flat out asserts that the thinking that created these problems will not solve the problems, meaning our conventional conceptual frameworks, the very ways of thinking that led us into these messes, are insufficient. Instead, it posits that only awareness, which is beyond time, space, and causality, can see solutions to problems that have not yet been solved. The vision presented is of a grassroots global community gaining confidence in awareness, using it to solve not just individual problems, but the problems of the world. They even have a theme song in the Great Freedom Community. It's up to you, and it's up to me. It embodies this idea of collective responsibility, but rooted in individual transformation first. It's basically claiming that true, novel solutions emerge from a state beyond our usual problem-solving mind.
Okay, so bringing it back to the practical, for someone listening right now, maybe intrigued, what does this one simple change actually look like in practice? Is it complicated? Do we need to, I don't know, go live in a cave or commit to hours of silent meditation every day?
No, not at all. That's really emphasized. The most important instruction is simply to rest as awareness for short moments repeated many times until it becomes obvious at all times. Short moments, repeated often. The source explicitly states there's no effort to be made and no tricks or gimmicks. It's not about austerities or long formal meditations, unless you want to do those, of course. It's primarily about relaxing and allowing, because awareness is seen as already accomplished. It's already here. And it's also stressed that one's own circumstances, whatever they may be, are always the perfect opportunity for rest. You don't need special conditions. Stuck in traffic? Perfect. Dealing with a difficult colleague? Perfect.
It sounds incredibly accessible,
Yeah.
which is definitely appealing in our modern world where, time feels so scarce. But are there common misconceptions? Or maybe initial difficulties people face when trying to apply this practice that sounds simple?
That's a really good question, because while it is simple, it's not always easy, right? At least not initially. Probably the biggest misconception is thinking you have to do something specific. Like you have to stop thinking or feel a certain blissful state. Or people think awareness is something far off they need to attain. The challenge is often just letting go of that deeply ingrained habit of engaging with every single thought, feeling, or sensation that pops up. It's a kind of radical non-doing. The teaching really emphasizes that awareness is already here, always. The difficulty often lies simply in our habit of overlooking it, of being totally absorbed in the points of view, and remembering to just rest for a moment.
This ease of access seems really central to the Great Freedom teaching. How did something presented as so profound become so widely available, especially compared to some ancient wisdom traditions that were often felt quite hidden or were hard to access?
Yeah, that's another really interesting aspect. Candice actually refers to the internet as the new holy river for spiritual seekers. Unlike ancient teachings often hidden away in monasteries or passed down through obscure lineages, modern tech can instantly connect people all over the world. And the Great Freedom teaching seems specifically designed to be user-friendly for the modern person. It's communicated in plain language, it's not culturally specific, and it aims to directly meet the needs of this age. Plus, it's distributed freely online.
And for those who feel they want some support in this practice, what does Great Freedom offer? Is there a structure?
Yes, they offer what they call the four comforts. These are resting as awareness itself, that's the primary comfort, the teacher, Candice O'Denver, the teaching, the body of work, and the community, other practitioners. This whole support system is designed to provide unerring instruction and guidance. It helps create an environment where this seemingly simple shift can actually take root and stabilize for anyone committed to the practice.
So for our listeners who are curious, maybe a little skeptical even, how should they approach this? What's the first step?
Candice encourages listeners to simply test these things for yourself. Like a scientist, she says, who has a hypothesis and then tests it to see the result. She advises, don't be fooled by thinking you need to do anything else. The commitment is really simple. Just to rest one moment at a time as awareness. Try it. See what happens. The proof, as it were, is in your own direct experience.
So we've really explored how this seemingly simple shift in attention, this resting as awareness, is presented by Candice O'Denver. How it's seen as capable of profoundly transforming our personal lives, our relationships, and even potentially our capacity to tackle huge global challenges. It's quite a radical call, isn't it? To rethink what we believe about our identity and where true power and solutions actually lie.
It really is. And what's truly fascinating, I think, is the bold hypothesis embedded in it. If problems, both our individual ones and the big global ones, truly stem from clinging to these fragmented points of view, and from clinging to a false sense of a separate, solid self, What might our world actually look like if a critical mass of humanity genuinely embraced this one simple change? What if we moved beyond fixed beliefs and became the solution rather than constantly seeking one outside ourselves?
Yeah, imagine that. Imagine a world where actions flow more spontaneously from this effortless wisdom she talks about, where something like obedience to the unenforceable just means acting naturally in harmony with the underlying unity of everything, simply because that's recognized as our nature. So here's a thought to leave you with. If our true nature is already this flawless, compassionate awareness, what would we stop doing and what would we start being if we truly recognize that profound truth, not just intellectually, but in every moment? Think about it and just see what stirs within you.